And we're live. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to first ever live show for the Standalone Book Club live show. Welcome to Elizabeth from Reading Riley, if I'm saying that correctly.
Welcome to first ever live show for the
And Heather from Heather's Book Review. So yeah, these lovely, lovely ladies have joined me for talking about The Last Housewife. So I'm very excited. We said we just start off with just like some casual thoughts. So I don't know if anyone wants to kick us off.
What is this book about?
Should I do a quick synopsis?
Yeah, we should probably do a quick synopsis.
So The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead, is it? Mm-hmm. It's about a girl. Well, this is my my memory. It's about a woman who is like 1 year into a marriage, kind of a housewife type. And she finds out that one of her college friends has committed suicide. And she listens actually to a podcast by her old childhood friend who covers it. And he says that although it's ruled a suicide or is likely to be ruled a suicide, it's kind of dodgy because it's the same way that their old friend died way back when, like 10 years ago, I think, at college. So we kind of explore... the main character goes back and explores like what happened to her friend, what happened 10 years ago. Although I feel like that synopsis is the kickoff point. It goes into some crazy directions.
Yeah, for sure. No, that was really good though. I think you covered it just really well.
I did just finish it yesterday, so I'm proud.
Oh, perfect.
I finished it on Friday too, because then I was like, is our live stream Saturday? And then I was like, shit, I gotta finish the book. And then I'm like, wait, it's Sunday, but I still powered through.
So
lots of thoughts.
Yeah.
This is essentially a sex cult.
Yeah.
Right. I gotta say, I was triggered throughout.
Yeah.
There's definitely some sensitive subjects going on in this book.
Yeah.
But but it did not leave me feeling hopeless like some books do that go that dark. It left me feeling I don't want to say hopeful, but like not angry, I guess.
Yeah.
I really liked it. I could not I gave this book 5 stars. I finished it and I was like, I have to, like, what am I going to rate this?
Yeah.
I just could not give it anything else but 5 stars. I had to. Like, it wasn't even one of those ones where I was like, I knew it was going to be 5 stars. I just sat down, I thought about it, and I'm like, it can't be anything else for me,
Yeah.
What did you guys rate it?
Okay, so I'm like on the opposite end, and I need to preface it with like, I think the majority of the books that I read are like psychological thrillers. Okay. So when I got this, I also like hate reading the synopsis of a book because I feel like it gives it away. So I really had no idea like what it was going to be about.
Okay.
And then, after like 80 pages in, I was like, oh, okay. Like we're going down this like cold kind of route. Okay. We'll see how it goes. But I just wasn't anticipating like how disturbing it was going to be. But what I really appreciated was like there is like a trigger warnings page in the beginning of the book, right? So it's like right here. And I'm sure you guys had that on like your ebook too. Sorry. And it just tells you like, okay, content warning, suicide, rape, physical violence, sexual violence, trauma, self-harm. Like the list goes on. And I was like, oh. And then, like as I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, like it just was so like disturbing to read. And then I would have to put it down because I was like, okay, like I just need, maybe I should just read something else for like a chapter or so and then come back. But I guess I don't know. I was hopeful there was going to be more of like a thriller kind of vibe, if you will. And I felt like it was suspenseful. Like a lot of the scenes in the story where she's like, with the cult and then like escapes and then back and forth with that. Like I did enjoy that feeling being like, oh my gosh, is she going to be okay? But then I'm like, I don't know. I just was missing like a little bit of the thriller piece. Like, all the content. I was like, I don't know. Like I couldn't like love it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What did you end up rating it?
I gave it a 2.5, which
Oh,
like,
wow.
I know it pains me to say because I loved like In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. And then I'm always thinking like, okay, if I love a book by author, like I always think like, I know it's not going to be like that, but I think like, oh, I'm probably going to love this one too. And then I'm like, I need to stop because then I get my hopes up.
I am like really heavily influenced by social commentary in a book. So like if it's like if I don't love the story as much, or it like if it has social commentary in it, it's next level for me, and it holds more weight with me as when I rate books and how I enjoy books when it does that. So like for some reason, like if I were to like judge it just on the plot, yeah, probably would have been a little lower, but like this book was so strong in social commentary and had so much to say that I could not deny that, because that holds a lot of weight for me personally. So like that's what I loved about it so much, is that it just had so much to say. And it really took a stance, and I respect that so much.
Yeah.
What about you, Gabby? What did you give this?
Yeah. So I give it 4 stars. And I think it's like a mix of opinions between the two of you, because I love the commentary. Sorry. Of course, my boyfriend has to get food right now. So it's like a mix between the commentary was so poignant and just so powerful and so like unabashed in what it was trying to say. So I loved that part. And I thought it was really well written. It was really interesting. But I didn't have like a good time reading it because it was so like intense. So like In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, I thought it was a bit more campy, a little bit more fun, and I read it in one day. This one, I could keep reading, but I didn't want to pick it back up because I had this really uncomfortable feeling of, like so many horrific things are happening. Not a bad thing. That's what the book wanted to do, right? So it's like 100%. I know that's what it was trying to do, and I'm like in awe how well it did it. But I was like, I don't want to pick this book up. I don't want to go back. I don't want to know. I don't want the stress of her going back to that sex party. But overall, I think it was really amazing. Like once I reflected, I was like, this is like probably 5 stars in like commentary of what it did. 3 stars in my enjoyment of it because it was too hard to read. So I settled on a 4. But it was really, really interesting how it was done. And even the ending I really liked. And I guess we kind of get into spoilers maybe. But just kind of talking about how it was structured, how it was kind of like a circle, because at the end we find out that what we're reading is kind of excerpts of her books with the podcast in it, and that's how the book ends. So I thought that was really interesting way to position it as well, and kind of leave it on this really ambiguous note of what happens to her. So that was really interesting.
Yeah. I love that. Like how I did really like the ending really redeemed it for me. Like just I was like, okay, how is this going to end? Wait, we said we're going to talk about spoilers, right?
Yeah. Spoilers.
Okay.
I need you guys to refresh my memory about this.
Okay. Well, so it's just like, it's that crazy scene where, okay, so many thoughts, and I don't know like where we want to, I'll just comment on what you said first, Gabby, with like how at the end, she's like, oh, my book is The Last Housewife. Like, I love when we see how the actual book like got its title. That's like one of my favorite things whenever I read a book, because I feel like, 8 out of 10 times it's said in the story. But yeah, just the ending of like her killing Don was just like wild. And I felt like it was really fast. Like that scene, I just like, I don't know if I was just like trying to read it like supersonic speed because I like couldn't like wait to see how it ended. But like that was wild. That part was crazy.
It was. And I think it was so cathartic too, because I feel like whenever I watch like shows and the protagonist has the opportunity to like kill the bad guy, but they don't do it because they're so much better than that. And there's holier than thou and all that. And she actually did it because she's right. If he went to prison, he probably just convert all those men in prison, get another cult going. And I just went through all the things he could do even in prison that would cause harm. And how it could be like, so bad. So I was with her. I was like, girl, if you're kind of sacrificing your life, I hope you get off. But it's for like a greater cause almost, because he's such a bad person. But then there's also so many other people. It's not just him.
That's right. Okay, it's coming back to me. Yeah, she had to. It was revenge, it was rage, it was everything she'd been through. Like, she just had to get rid of him.
Mhm.
Didn't care about what the rest of her life looked like. You know, she was like,
Mm.
ends now.
Yeah.
And did anyone else picture him as Don Draper?
Once they made that comment, yeah.
Yeah, I was picturing. Yeah, they said something in the book about Don Draper,
Yeah.
and so I immediately viewed him as John Hamm. And I gotta
Yeah.
say, like, I would probably join his cult too. Like, if it was John Hamm, I would like 100% be like, yes, sir. What can I do?
Nice.
What
Yeah.
can I do for you?
That is so funny. Yeah, I did
Yeah.
definitely picture him looking similar.
Yeah, to me, I kind of picture him how, you know, there's The Walking Dead, and there's that guy that like has like he's really evil and kills. I've never even seen it, but there's that guy and he like kills everyone. I remember there's like a scene with everyone on his knees and he's like super messed up. Let me see
I've
if I
never
could figure out
that. I
The
feel like
Walking
I'm one of
Dead.
the 2 people in the world.
Neeson or something like that. Negan. Is that his name? Oh yeah, this is him. Oh, that's it. So him, but like in a suit is what I imagined.
Ooh,
like
yeah.
a daddy type. That's what I imagined. I was like, ooh, I get it.
Yep.
Kind of.
Yeah, it was funny. When I obviously, like, I don't like to read the synopsis. I don't like to read anyone else's opinions until I'm done because I sometimes, you know, get persuaded easily. So after I finished, I went on Goodreads and I just laughed because someone, their comment was like, I just don't understand how you can go to some guy's house and like after a couple times meeting him, like all of a sudden you're beating your friends with a belt. Like it just wouldn't happen. Nobody would be like, oh, okay, this is normal kind of thing. And I just cracked up because as I was reading the book, I thought that I'm like, this isn't going to happen. Like somebody is going to be like, what the heck? And I remember Clem was kind of like, she was the only one that was really like, this is weird. Like, why, you know, are we here? Why are we doing this kind of thing? But it was just funny because I was like, I mean, it's a fair point. Like, I feel, you know, I don't know, that it was a little bit of a stretch. And like, I also felt, I don't know how you guys felt. How did you feel about like finding out Laurel was still alive? Because I was like, okay, I was just like, I get it that they look alike, but how did we not know that it wasn't really her and it was Rachel? But then I was like, was it supposed to be because they had people like in the police department that were like with this and were like, you know, no picture evidence and everything? So like, is that what we were supposed to take from that? Because I was kind of like, okay, come on, like we would know it's not really her, right?
Yeah, I think the idea is that anyone who saw
I don't think anyone had seen her.
Yeah, everyone that saw the body was in on it.
In on it.
Because
Yeah.
the police chief was that's why there was no photos.
Yeah.
I assume. So like, and the girl like that found her would have no clue what Laura looks like. She's just like,
Oh,
a
that's
random
true.
student.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, no one who like knows her.
Yeah.
Would have seen her. I think. I assume that's how they got away with it. I don't know. I was surprised. I don't know why, because I feel like it made sense with her how she was acting back when they were in the house in the first time. To me, like her behavior was already a bit sketch, and like I found it a bit surprising how quick she left once the main character wanted to leave. So I was like, this makes sense, but I was still surprised. But I quite liked that she took on Rachel's role, and Rachel was like their tormentor as well. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised by that part. That was a pretty good twist, I thought, that it was her. And you know, as far as like the believability of what happens, like it's so hard to say because like the stuff that happens in real life is crazier than anything you can write in a book, you know? Yeah. And it's so weird that like once we make it fiction, then we stop and say like that could never happen.
Yeah.
But like real life is scarier than this even, you know, like stuff happens that, you know, and human behavior is so hard to pinpoint or to set, you know, people are messed up. People are easily manipulated. People are, like, you can never really say how somebody else is going to behave or how something is going to affect them. And there are so many components. So, like, I believe it. Like, think of Nixium. This book was very close. Like, the cult was very similar to Nixium, I felt like. And everyone thinks I would never be that person. Like, I would never get sucked into a cult. But at the same time, people do. So, like, where is the disconnect?
Yeah.
No one thinks they're going to be sucked into a cult, but people get sucked in. It's a thing. It happens,
Yeah. They get sucked in, and then they don't even really, they're not even like just aware that it is a cult. They're just like, no, this is just how it is. Like, this is what's right.
I think even in the book, there's a point where Jamie's like, "You were in a cult," and she's like, "No, I wasn't." And they're like, "Girl, you were definitely in a sex cult."
There's no denying it.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think you're right. It's like, it's always like it wouldn't happen to me, but I think it was quite interesting because they showed that like Rachel was kind of like having feelers out. Like, she lived with the girls first to see whether they were even like susceptible to that kind of stuff. And that's how I got it. That's why she lived with them.
Yeah.
And once she vetted them as susceptible enough or like having enough problems and insecurities that they could be exploited, that's when she introduced them to her dad. And then I think at the end, it was one of in the interview, because my copy had an interview with the author as well. And the author went kind of through each girl and what was the thing that kind of he exploited to get them trusting, to keep them hooked and keep them like there. So with like Clem, it was quite interesting because the author said it was like all of these things that she thought as her virtues of, like, she's stubborn, but she's like strong-minded and independent. He kind of made her feel like those were bad things and like behavior she needs to stop. And then her friends kind of didn't, like, even when he said something like, "Oh, no one loves you and no one accepts you," like the main character's like, "Oh, I should say that I do love her," but she doesn't say anything. So it's like, so I think that was really interesting, like where he did the interview with the author, because clearly she thought a lot about this and like how they could be exploited and made to do this really terrible stuff to each other and stay. So it's very interesting.
I don't know who hurt Ashley Winstead.
I know. Like, poor thing.
I saw her comment somewhere, like that she had to write this book for herself. So like, I don't know what happened to her, but like, honestly, like some happened to her because she had to work through it with this book, and because she admitted to that. So like, curious about that story.
Yeah.
I also like the conversation in here about consent. There was, so like, you can't consent if you're drunk, right? So can you consent if you are brainwashed, if you're indoctrinated into something? And at what point are you considered brainwashed?
Right.
Are we all brainwashed by the patriarchy already? Can anyone ever actually consent? Like, how that it just goes, and you can just go on and on and on, Like, that's what I loved about this, is that commentary, like, really gets you thinking about the choices that we make. What are they our choices? And that whole idea of, if we're both using each other, who has the power? And can someone make you feel like you have the power, but at the same time be holding that over you, and you actually don't have that power, but you think you do? And this idea of like power going back and forth, and men and women, and just like all of the shit that we live through every day with the patriarchy as women. We understand things like how, the things that that give us attention also make us vulnerable. Like beauty, like, can turn heads, but it can also like turn the wrong heads. And that it goes from being something that gives you power to something that is scary.
Yeah.
100%.
And
So that's sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I have a similar question on what we're talking about, so I'm just going to circle it so I don't forget.
No worries. No, like you're so right. And even the interview with the author, even she talked a lot about beauty and how that was portrayed as well, and how it's like, oh, but women can weaponize their looks and weaponize their sexuality, and that's like their power. But she talked about how like that type of power is um it's like contingent on someone else giving it to you. So it's like the beauty is an eye of the beholder. Therefore, this beauty being power is only a power as long as the person looking at you, the person, the man or whatever, the patriarchy gives you it, because they're like, oh yes, you are beautiful. Whereas men's type of power, which is like money and so standing in society and that kind of stuff, it's like hard power that can't be so easily taken away. Or it's like more physical things rather than someone gracing with thinking you're beautiful. But even for women, it's like, it's so like once you're past 30, take that away because you're not hot enough and young enough anymore. So she was definitely like very intentional about it, which I thought like reading that was like so interesting because we kept like, you saw how much the author thought about it, which I think is very cool.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point too, is that like it's beholden on a man giving you that power, and it's like, you know, being attracted to whatever you are, whatever you have. And that's a really solid point.
Yeah. And it was just such a massive theme throughout the book. Like when the scene that I'm just remembering as we're talking about this is when she was like a teenager, remember? And like the guy at the party, like, she's like, I can make him kiss me. And they're just like making out or whatever. And she's like, tell me that you love me. And you're just like reading that and you're like, this is crazy. But she just was talking about like that power that she was feeling. And then once she felt it, like even into adulthood, she just like couldn't let it go. And that was like her reason of wanting to stay, was like she loved that feeling of having the ability to like, you know, have that power over the men.
Yeah.
The question that is really similar to what we were saying, it says, how do Jamie and Shay differ in their definitions of consent? And how would you personally define consent? And like, that is crazy because I didn't really think of how Jamie defined consent.
I didn't really either.
Like thinking of it now, he was always, I mean, I think I remember him trying to tell her, like how you were saying, Gabby, like you were in a cult, and she was like, no. Like I think he was trying to tell her a lot of times, like the things that have happened to you, like aren't okay. And she just kept saying, well, like, you know, I like some of that. So like, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he was really trying to like share his thoughts, but a lot of the time she just kept like rebuttaling it.
I think he just has a very black and white view of it because he's kind of an observer to it. Mm-hmm. So he has more of our societal thing. So it's like as a society, as a third party, we're like, well, this is wrong because he exploited you and blah, 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 which I'm not saying it's not. But she's like, but I know my inner thoughts. So, okay, this author interview, it turns out I've stolen all her thoughts, but she talked about how the main character, sorry, what's the main character's name? Shay. I keep saying main character because I forgot her name. So she kept saying, so the question in that interview was like, Shay is very like kind of hard on herself, but very forgiving of Laurel, mm-hmm. And they've gone through a very similar thing. And it was, the author said, because Shay can see her inner thoughts, she can be more critical because she knows she enjoyed some of it and she wanted some of it. And she knows that she kind of wants to go back to some of it. Whereas she doesn't know Laurel's inner thoughts, so she can kind of project this image of, oh, poor Laurel, she's just a victim, mm-hmm. onto Laurel, whereas she doesn't know her inside thinking and all that and her desires. So I think with Jamie it's kind of similar because he can be like, oh no, poor you, like you're definitely 100% not in the wrong, but she's like, well, I did consent to some of it and I wanted some of it, and I know all of the dark little things in my heart, because so she's a bit like harder on herself, so she maybe has a different idea of what consent was to her, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and she, like, it was really interesting that she did enjoy a lot of what was happening. And she was battling with that within herself as well the whole time. I think that's why she had such a hard time like admitting it to Jamie, admitting it to herself, because she was struggling with the fact that she liked that. It's almost like this masochistic thing, and that's okay too. Like women always feel like they can't admit to things like that, and like it's not feminine, or it's not okay, or like if we do have thoughts like that, it must be some kind of internalized misogyny or something like that. But like we're just humans too, just like men. Like we have different facets to our personalities, and that's okay. We don't have to be something. Not that like I'm saying it's like she should have been in this cult, but but that's
I feel like
in general with women, like women are super into true crime. Right? Generally.
Yeah.
And when somebody asks you, I mean, I can't speak for you guys, but when somebody asks why, a lot of times people will say, it makes me feel like I am safer when I watch true crime, because I can prepare for like watching out for myself and being in a better position. But also, like, it's okay to just like it. It's okay to be interested and fascinated in that, and not need an excuse like I want to protect myself. Like that you don't have to go there. You're allowed to embrace the fact that, hey, like I'm a human. I find murder fascinating, and I enjoy watching and reading about it. Like that's okay.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Honestly, that is. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I feel like Jamie tried to like be like, oh, but it's your daddy issues, or it's like some of your childhood and all of this. And like to an extent it was, but like to an extent, like this was to such an unhealthy degree, but it's okay to enjoy BDSM and stuff like that. Whereas Jamie was more like he wasn't too judgmental. I think he was all right in that sense, but he definitely was like looking for, he's like, oh, what happened to you and X, and like what? And she's like, yeah, it had an impact on me, but like also it's okay. If this was consensual and it was like BDSM rather than abuse, it'd be okay. But it's like you're right. It's like always having to like look for an excuse on why it's okay and why you enjoy that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Sure. All right, what about this one? It says, Shay persists in viewing Laurel as a victim. Do you guys agree? What do Shay's expectations for Laurel prevent Shay from seeing? So that's a loaded question. I mean, she clearly, she does see Laurel as a victim. Like she literally went back to try to save her and put herself in that danger again. Knowing on top, like knowing everything that like Laurel and Don have done, she still was like, I'm going to go back. Like, I'm going to save her. I'm going to risk my own life. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Which I thought was like so crazy.
She had it in her head that like she had to save Laurel from this.
Yes.
If it killed her, But I think it kind of touches on like what Gabby was saying earlier too, about how like we're not in her head and we can't see her motives. And she just assumed that Laurel, like that's kind of like part of the twist, right? Is that we're assuming that Laurel is a total victim in this, but Laurel also is like choosing this, she is absolutely choosing it. And so we can't assume that she's a victim. And Shay was willing to risk everything to save her, because their relationship, she just felt like she owed it to her and like she was her protector. And they had like a special bond in that way. But yeah, I don't know, like, but Laurel was not willing to give it up.
No. I was actually really, really surprised that in that moment when, Laurel like has the dagger and you think she's going to injure Shay, but then Shay's like, you're my best friend. Like I came back for you. Like we need to leave together. I was like, she's not. Like she's so manipulated by Dom. Like she's just going to fixate on that. But she was like, go run, like run away. Like it just took that one moment for Shay to be like, I love you. And you're my best friend, etc., for her to be like, okay, like go run, you know.
Yeah.
But then what, 10 pages if that later, she kills herself because Don tells her to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you could tell she just had that. She was like, okay, I also love Shay, and I know that she does mean what she's saying. Sorry, I'm a little congested. It does mean what she's saying to me. Like, I know that I mean a lot to her, but I like my loyalty still, like, in the long run lies with Don.
Yeah.
You know, it was
so deep.
It was
so deep into it. Like, she could not see past that.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, even the amount of effort she went to go back to him, it was kind of crazy. It's like her whole life just became about that. And I think that was really, really interesting. And for me, what was really interesting was like, would he have built all this to an extent that it was built if he didn't have Laurel by his side? Because it sounded to me like kind of implied that she did like a lot and she was like a really big part of it. And even I think Shay says something like, this is just like her theater and her actors and the clothes and all of that kind of brought it together. So she's not even just complicit in her own abuse. She kind of perpetuated in all these women, and then she knew that Rachel was killing all these women, and she did stop her eventually, but only when it was like threatening the way they're living because other people will find notice. But like the fact that Rachel was killing all these women wasn't enough to be like, that's enough, we can't do that, but rather, oh, they're gonna find out, you need to stop. So Laura, I feel like, is really like, sure, there was something broken and something really, really hurt about her, and like, but she was also like really deep into it, and she really perpetuated all this abuse and enabled it, and really didn't go against it because it suited her. So yeah, it was a very interesting character, I think.
I have a question. I listened to the audio, and I didn't have the physical book. What the hell was the society called? Was it Potter or Pater? Like, how was it spelled?
Pater. So in my head, I always said Pater.
I said Pater. But yes, I just thought it was Pater, but I think that's because I'm not a native English speaker.
And then I was like, is that a thing? Like, I'm like, what is that, just a word that she's making up? And then I said this exact question to my husband, and he's like, well, because I told him how they're all called like daughters, and he's like, maybe it's supposed to be like a spinoff of like paternal. Oh, see, he was right. Dang.
Damn, bang on.
Wow.
Yeah, in the audio they pronounced it like Pater.
It's Latin for father.
Wow.
Latin. There we go. Remember, what did he go by at the end? Like Nico, I don't know.
Prophet? Oh, yes. The Greek name.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's funny. It's like, I was in my head, I pictured it Pottere. That's how.
Yeah.
That's quite elaborate.
That would have thrown me. Okay, so were you guys able to like predict a lot as the book was going on? Like, I'm looking at my notes because I like to read the book in parts and then just like sit on a part after a while. So like in the first, I read up to like page 70, and my theory I wrote down was I wrote an old boys cult thing between the frats, like the fraternities, and maybe a members in the police department. That's what I wrote, and it ended up being that with Adam. But like, as you guys were reading this, were you finding yourself predicting what was going on, and like, or was kind of everything like a big twist?
I think I could kind of see where it was going, but there were still things that surprised me. You know, for the first, like, I don't even know how much the book, there's not even any mention of cults at all. I was like, is this book about a cult? Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Because it took so long to get to that, or it felt like it did anyway.
Agreed.
Yeah. But I felt like you kind of could see like where it was going, but still the twists got me. Like the Laurel stuff got me.
Yeah.
Personally, I wouldn't really call, like, it's not that I predicted everything, more like I wasn't trying to, because to me, it wasn't really a mystery. It was like a thriller, but it wasn't a thriller that was also a mystery novel. Because I thought that we found out like all this dark past stuff about Shay quite early on, but then I looked and it was only 40% in, so it was already 40% in, so it's actually not that early. But in my head, I was like, oh, we found out it so quickly. I feel like usually this is like a last 70% kind of reveal. So I feel like, yeah, so I was thinking about it and I was like, well, this isn't really a mystery novel because we're more like it's about the suspense of it and like uncovering all this stuff. Most of it wasn't like really big shocking twists, although some were, like Laurel, I was really surprised. The Dawn thing, it didn't initially click in my mind, but that was kind of obvious, and that's fair enough. But yeah, it felt more like a suspense novel rather than like a mystery thriller.
Yeah, totally, 100%. How did you guys feel about the podcast element?
Was it done specially in audiobook, or was it
No, because okay, that's my only thing that could have made it better, I feel like, though, because the podcast element is not like a fully produced podcast. Like, you're not listening to the podcast, you're listening to Jamie interviewing Shay. So in the audio, they didn't do any kind of like production for that. But that's what I want when I have like when a book is pitched that has a podcast element. I want the audio to be like full produced, like a podcast.
Yeah, that would have been really cool.
Intro music and like stuff like that.
Yeah.
And oh, my friends are back. Y'all can come in. It's okay. But yeah, I really wanted that, and that was the only part where I was like, oh, what a bummer, because I felt sometimes it feels like they're just adding that podcast element in order to market it that way.
Yeah.
You know?
Agreed. I wasn't like over impressed with the podcast piece of the book. Like, I enjoyed it because I felt it was mainly Shay, like, letting us learn more about her and her past, and then also like her relationship with Jamie, like getting closer after you could tell it was like strained. So like I feel like it was kind of obvious that like it was going to go down that route with those guys. So I almost kind of looked forward to their conversations, but at the same time I was like, I don't know, it didn't necessarily feel like podcasty. It felt more just like a converse. Like, I even think there was a scene in here when she's like, I forget that like this is a podcast. Like, I feel like we're talking, and in my head, I'm yeah, same. Like, it doesn't like it didn't really have like a podcast kind of like feel, if that makes sense. So
because like I feel like that was just like a device that she used in order to tell that story, and because that's where we got all of the past information from, was that interview. Yeah. So it could have been like a dual timeline. Yeah. You know, where it was like and present. It could have just been that, but you know, it didn't bother me. Like, I wasn't mad that it was set up like that, and I like something that's more. I like when there's like in the book. Does it show? Is it typed out like it's an interview?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I like that. I'm fine with that. I just wish like they had taken it to like the fully produced.
That would have been cool. I was like really reading it, and I was like, this is world's longest podcast like episode in life, because it was one episode podcast episode because 705 or something. And I was like, how is he gonna get this much content into like it's besides the point. But yeah, I agree that it was kind of just like a plot device to get Shay to have all these like testimonials almost, because and then at the end she reflects that maybe she decided to kill Dawn even like before that moment because she wanted to have this like story of her life like explained so people would understand. I thought that was interesting, but I didn't think it added like a whole load, and I'm disappointed the audiobook. I was like, oh, maybe I should listen to the audiobook because I love it when it's like proper podcast.
Yeah.
But I have a question. How do you feel about Jamie?
He was like my favorite character.
Was he? Okay. Because I have complicated feelings about Jamie. Yeah. So I like Jamie, right?
Yeah.
But my thing is, like the story of Shay's life is like the whole thing is that men only valued her for her looks. Like even Dawn, it was like, oh my God, you're so beautiful, and this is why you're my favorite. And it's like all those leering men in pageants, and everyone like always seeing her as kind of their property. So it kind of rubbed me the wrong way that Jamie, who's supposedly her best friend, always like had a crush on her, was in love with her, and wanted her. Because I'm like, this girl cannot get a break. Is there one person out there who just likes her for
Her.
is okay just being friends rather than like always wanting something more and sexual out of her? And Jamie didn't come off that way, but I just got I don't know. I was like,
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I think it was intentionally written as like a romance subplot, you know, and to add that extra little factor in there. But that's a really good point, especially with like all of the themes in this book. You would think she would have somebody that wasn't interested in her sexually, you know?
Yeah. Or like at least I would have been fine if he really actually was her friend all along, and then now they've developed feelings for each other. But it felt like this whole time he was there for her just because he wanted to sleep with her. And in the end, that's what it was about. And maybe it wasn't. But I was just a bit like, oh. And the fact that she didn't even like clock it, I think if she clocked it and said something and they had a conversation about it, maybe it would have bothered me. But that she didn't even acknowledge it, I was like, oh. Hun, you need a friend that's just your friend, not a weird sex cult sister. Or something.
Yeah. And that also like leads me to think too, because I always thought Jamie, like, it's like, oh, it's like the typical trope of like, we grew up together, but I loved you this whole time, but you have no idea. Like, okay, we know that. But also it made me think a lot about her marriage and her husband too. Like, there was a part of me in the book, I was like, okay, I don't know. Sorry, so many thoughts. Two routes. I thought maybe he's like also in the cult because I feel like we didn't know a whole ton about him. And I was like, why are we like writing this marriage piece in here? Like, I know in the end, she ends up being like, no, I'm not going to be with you. Like, you're like all the others kind of thing. You know, you like, he cut her off from the money. You just want me to be, you know, like a trophy wife essentially. But then I was also like, I don't know. I was kind of left feeling a little like was the marriage like necessary? Like, I don't know. I just like, we didn't really know a lot about Cal. Like, yeah, he seemed to be the typical, like, you know, she's like, you're just like everybody else. Like all of your friends are the same. And I'm like, yeah, but like, I wanted a little bit more of that. Like, I feel like we didn't get a whole ton about her marriage. And then she's like, no, I'm not going to be with you. Oh yeah. And then he hired the PI.
Yeah.
Which I was like, oh my gosh. Like, and he was convinced, like, almost kind of like leading back to the beauty, like, oh, she's so beautiful. Like, the only reason this can be happening is because she has to be sleeping with someone else. You know, like, I think as readers, we were supposed to be like, look at like one track mind, like, cuts her off with the money, doesn't trust her, hires a PI that Jamie tackles.
Yeah. Never mind, she actually was cheating on him, but I was like, he's not wrong though.
Oh my gosh, that didn't even click though.
Well, so I have a perfect. So the author answered this question in the interview, and she said something super interesting. So she said, "Cal is the bridge that connects the extraordinary misogyny of the Patters to the ordinary misogyny of everyday life." And so she talked about how her intention, because like the interview basically asked, is it necessary she was married? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, it's kind of about showing that even though Shay escaped that, she kind of recreated that dynamic even in her married life, but to a way lesser extent, obviously. And then just to make Carl a little bit more like relatable to real life, because he's like kind of like just a little bit of a jerk. I mean, he's got some points. Like if my partner did that to me, just disappeared, didn't answer my phones, didn't like, you know, I'd be like, are you dead? Like it would be very disturbing. So I have some sympathy for Carl, not much, but a little bit. I kind of understand where he's coming from, and she was cheating on him. But I thought that was quite interesting, like a very interesting point.
Yeah, I thought of it as like representing her choosing her, like, because of what happened in her past, because of all that stuff, she's now in a place where she is choosing safety. over
Yeah.
love. You know, she felt safe. He was well off. He was rich. She was comfortable in that, and she felt safe. And that was because of her past, because of the cult, because they were constantly trying to convince her that she needed a man to keep her safe through, like, in the cult, and that no way she could be by herself on all of this. So, like, yeah, so she grew up and she chose safety, and security over love. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
As to like why
it was written in there.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. I feel like I'm glad that you said that author perspective, because as I was reading it, like, I just wanted a little bit more into like what their marriage was like. You know, he was such a mystery, and that's why, like, my mind is always going towards like the crazy. I'm like, is he gonna be part of the cult? Like, is that why he's in here? And then it did make more sense as the story was going on, but I was like, I just wanted a little bit more of him, because he was such a mystery. You know what I mean?
There was a line in there, like, when she was discussing like her life with her husband, where she was talking about art and like how she felt like she used to be the artist and now she is a piece of art.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that was pretty poignant, because she literally was just like decoration. She was decorating. You know?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I do think I understand what the author was trying to do, especially after reading the interview. And I was like, wow, that's really, really clever, really cool. How she, like you said, she chose safety, but also kind of went back to those kind of old-fashioned gender roles in her relationship that were kind of like packaged to her in that part, like by Dawn. But the way it was written was a little bit of an afterthought. It was like a little bit, when you think about it, you can get all these things, but I don't feel like it was entirely there on the page, because he was such an afterthought. Like, he barely showed up. So maybe they could have been a little bit more fleshed out. A little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Let's see. Should I read one of the other questions? In the author guide? Let's see. Or the, what is this? Reading group guide. Let me find a good one. Okay, what about this? What is Jamie's primary motivation throughout the book? This kind of leads me, like, wondering what you were saying, Gabby, like, about just him in general, like, loving her that whole time, but also, like, we kind of wanted there to be, I wanted there to be, like, one male role that wasn't, like, obsessed with her. So it says, what is Jamie's primary motivation throughout the book? How would you categorize his relationship with Shay? Changes throughout the book, right?
I mean, he wanted to, obviously he's has a podcast, so he's getting content for that. But his goal was probably to get with Shay.
Probably
was.
That's what I'm thinking. I think in the beginning it was an excuse to get in touch, because he tells Shay that he tried multiple times, not just after the murder, but just like he tried to get in touch with Shay, but she kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. So I think at the beginning, at least, it was kind of like, hey, I really want to reconnect with this person. And he was quite like we're told that his face falls or something like that when he finds out that she's married and stuff.
Yes.
And I do think that it evolved, and once he saw the true, like, horrific, like, what's happening, he was horrified, and he wanted to make it better, and he wanted to expose them, and not just for Shay, but for, like, all the women and stuff. So I think he in the end had right motivation towards the end, but I think started off with, oh, I have this excuse to get in touch with her. Maybe she'll get in touch with me now, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I kind of love that we don't know what happens to her in the end. Like, does she end up getting the 20 years or not? Like, I do love when we're kind of left off, just like interpreting it on our own. Hence the book for her, right? Like, why, and the podcast piece. She's like trying to have people understand from her perspective and why she did what she did. But I love that we didn't find out. Did you guys like that piece, or do you wish that you knew?
I liked it up to the interpretation and like a bit ambiguous. I think it was really cool to make it like a circle, like I said before, and then because it was like a circle, it's kind of like open up to interpretation because they've not finished writing it. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
I don't remember feeling like I was left in suspense.
Oh.
Well, it's been a while since I read it now, so like I'm trying to remember. Like I don't remember I thought it was wrapped up, but I guess not.
No, so the way it ends is like the last chapter is saying, oh, Shay is facing 20 years in prison, but we're trying to build a defense and we're going to do this podcast and this book to kind of explain her perspective. And their argument was going to be that it was self-defense in a sense. So it's kind of like, will she go to prison or will she get off? But I feel like it was kind of not the point. Do you know what I mean? Like her story was, her trauma was resolved and she did what she had to do to be at peace. So it's like you said, she didn't care what happened to her life. Like obviously now she wants to like live a free life. That'd be preferable. Right. But she got rid of that thing holding her back and that thing like tormenting her. So either way, she's free. Like I love that ending, I think, line when she like, when Jamie asks her, why are you smiling? Or why are you laughing? Like, yes. What the fuck did you just do? And she's like, I just told them one word, free. And there's like this freedom. So either way, it should be fun.
You're right. Yeah.
Wait, someone came in. Hello, honey. Hi, ladies. Loved it. My fave book read this year. Wow.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. To recap, I don't know if you just came in, but me and Elizabeth also loved it, I guess. And Heather's on the fence. So.
But this is what I like love about these conversations, though, because it's just really helping me see it from like I see why you guys loved it. Mm-hmm. And I do like the book is so heavy, right? Like there's so many messages and so many like important things in it too. And it's like, I think for me, and this is just a personal thing, like because sometimes I'm trying to branch out with like not just the typical like psychological thriller that I love. Like I'm trying to think of like, okay, like think of the book like as it is. Like what is the book? What is it trying to accomplish? You know, and just focusing on that, like what are the good things you liked about it? What do you wish more of, kind of thing, you know? Mm-hmm. But I think I'm always so like, as I'm reading, I'm like, I'm waiting for like the thriller piece. And it's like, well, no, this was more of like a suspense, right? Like, so when I think of it through that viewpoint, it's like, you know.
Yeah, I think this book was definitely more like social commentary, suspense, rather than, you know, like thriller. It wasn't like, it had some shocking elements. Well, it had a lot of shocking elements, but not so much surprising all of the time. But
yeah. Agreed.
So yeah, I think I know what you mean. You have to like change how you view it.
Yeah, oh for sure. Which is something that I have to like remind myself often.
Yeah. Is there anything? How do you feel about the 1001 Arabian Nights, who was used kind of as a bookend to the whole thing. So it's like beginning with Shahrazad, I think, and I thought that was and I thought that was really cool. And then again in the offer interview, she said that the reason she chose it was kind of like because the main character of that also kind of uses her storytelling and her beauty and all of that as like. Okay, so it was like she tells these stories to the king and to prolong her life. So it's kind of like author was reflecting how it must be so terrifying and daunting every night basically to fight for your life with these stories and with this creativity you have and everything you have. And then at the end of the story, it's a happy ending because he doesn't kill her and they get married. But then the author was like, I don't see how it's a happy ending that she got stayed with this tyrant and like abuser. Like married to him and shackled to him. And I think that was quite an interesting, like the way this book was talking, you know, about women and power and
yeah. Well, that story was also kind of paralleling Shay's story as well, because she essentially was a martyr, you know.
Yeah.
So essentially he was a martyr to save all these other women so that he wouldn't, because he was killing his wife every night, and every morning he'd get a new wife. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to be the one. I'm going to stay more than one night. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to save all these other women. I'm going to sacrifice myself. And so that's really what Shay was doing too. When she kept putting herself into danger, going into that situation over and over again to save Laurel, to save all these other women, and she didn't care about herself. She was making herself the martyr. So yeah, it was really parallel stories. I did not know what Scheherazade was. I had to look it up. But yeah, after I did, I was like, okay, I see why it's in here.
Yeah.
That's very interesting way to see as well. I think you're totally right. Like, it's like because not like, you know, if you're there for yourself, you'd go into one party, escape, and then be like, thank you for like not taking my life. Well, I'm never going back. But she just kept going back. So that's super interesting point. And how did you feel about what's that woman's name that invited her to
Vicky?
the party?
I was just thinking about her too. I'm surprised we haven't brought her up yet. I totally forgot. That was rough. That was the scene where they're like running.
Sad.
Yeah. And then, oh my gosh. And her hater was the chief of police, Adam. Guys, that was wild. That whole scene, I was like, I don't know. And then when she dies, I was just like so pissed. I was like, no, we were so close. We were so
I know.
Close.
The second they talked about escaping together, I was like, no, she's gonna die. It's not gonna end. Well, I thought she would like betray her or something, so I kind of thought she was gonna do a Laurel. But I was like, why are you talking out loud about this? Not looking out when there's someone's coming. What are you doing? So
I know. They're just like in the forest laughing, and I was like, no laughing right now. Like, keep running.
A hunt.
I just knew it too. Like, you could just feel it as you were reading. You're like, no, the foreshadowing. This is their one happy moment together, and it's not. No, it's not gonna end well. Yeah, that was rough.
It was rough. Yeah, I think her character is super interesting to me because it's like someone that lured all of these other girls in, and like to her that like reward was living in this every single day, and like this super patriarchal structure, and that was like her haven, and she wanted it so much. And I don't think we ever find out kind of why, or maybe we do and I forgot. But yeah, we don't know that much about her, but I just found her like, it's so sad. And even with all this, like, I want to be subservient to you, she still really looked out for Shay, and she like vouched for her multiple times and kind of saved her multiple times. So I was like, you want to live in this like punishing society, patriarchal society for yourself, but I appreciate that you still have empathy for other women who you don't even know that well, but you're still kind of looking out for like Shay and whatever. So yeah, I found her story super sad.
I know. Yeah. And now that we're talking about her, I'm remembering she did not have a good upbringing. Like, I want to say there may have been like mentions of like sexual abuse from her dad. Is that right?
I don't remember that, but I do know she was like, look, she was being a realist about it. She's like, look, this is how the real world is. Except when I'm here, I get to wear designer clothes. I get jewelry. And she's just saying like, this is no different. So why can't I take advantage of it? And that's where this like whole idea of consent comes in, and how like and like power, and like he's using them, but they're ultimately using her, you know? So it's like, where do you draw that line, like, of who has the power and who's being used and who is not?
Yeah. That's a great point. And she says that too in that forest scene to him. You know, he's like, you do whatever I say, blah, blah. And she's like, no, like, I was using you to try to make it to the hilltop or whatever. And I think that's what it was called.
Yeah, and she only snapped out of it once she realized that he wasn't gonna help her get there, right? So it's not like she was like, oh, I should not have been treated this way, let me leave. It's like, he's not gonna do what he says he's gonna do, so I'm just stuck with this man for no reason, so let me leave because of that, which I thought was really interesting. But she was like so smart and very aware of her situation. Like you said, she was like very like pragmatic. Because even she was like, yeah, I can't just leave now, Shay. That's stupid. Let's wait till he's like away with his wife. Like she still talked about it out loud in the forest when they were being chased. So that's one thing, but she wasn't like super like Shay was quite emotional and like driven by impulses, whereas I think Nikki was more like very thought it through and pragmatic. And even when she decided to escape, she was like, this is the smartest time to do it. This is how I'm going to do it, like a plan, which I thought was really cool of her. And like, yeah, sad way to go, but
I know. Oh man.
Well, I hate to do this, y'all, but I have got to check out of this hotel room.
No worries.
It's okay.
No worries at all. I mean, we've been going for an hour. I feel like, we say everything we feel we need to say?
Yeah, it was such a good chat. I'm so glad I got to get both of your perspectives.
Thank you so much for having us, Gabby.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, this was a really good book and a really good one to discuss. So I feel like
100%.
There was a lot. Like we could go on. Like
I can't believe it's been an hour. I didn't even realize.
But yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes.
And it was really awesome getting to chat with you guys.
Yes.
Thank you for coming. It's been such a pleasure, and I feel like it just enhanced my reading experience being able to talk to you.
Absolutely. Like we always want someone to talk about the books with, right? That's why.
Yeah, it's true.
We have this community. It's awesome. I love it.
Love it. Thank you for hosting.
No problem. No problem at all. Thank you for coming, you both. And yeah, I guess that's it. Next book we're reading for the book club is House of Hunger, and it's going to be in November because I'm drowning, but that's I'm going to tell everyone on Twitter. I was like, I can't do this next month.
Yeah. Sounds good. I'll take a look at it. I haven't heard of that one yet.
It's really cool. It's by Alexis Henderson.
That's definitely one that I've been interested in.
Yeah.
I will definitely come check out the live show and see if I can read it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully. I don't have I don't have co-hosts, so you know. I'll
check it out and let you know if it sounds good.
I'll hit you up when I get a chance. But yeah, all right. I guess that's the end. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. The classic waving.